I'll tell you what my first impressions were. Quite charming. Half-timbered houses, window boxes with petunias and bright geraniums blooming on every sill. Little girls with ribbons in their hair, little boys with aprons stitched in bright colors. If there was poverty, I confess I didn't see it. It was heaven. And everywhere you went, music.
Nora Wall, an American, lived in Hitler's Germany from 1934 to 1938. For most Germans, these were good years, a time of growing prosperity. Hitler's Nazis had promised national revival, and they boasted enormous popular support.
Вы не просто русские, вы русские, осознавшие, что вы русские. Вы пробужденные русские. Мы все с вами настоящие русские. Русские вперед!
Родина! Свобода! Путин!
Родина! Свобода! Путин! Мы победим!
I was to stay in Bad Godesberg in Western Germany. The day that I arrived, the Führer himself was in town, Adolf Hitler. Crowds 3, 4, 5 thick lining the roads, and this bubbling enthusiasm. One woman turned to me, a perfect stranger, and said, "He is my mother and my father." He keeps me safe from all harm.
Germany in these years was gripped in a cult of the Führer, the leader. The Nazis urged Germans to put their differences aside, to rally behind Hitler, trusting in the glorious future of their country and the fact that Hitler could do no wrong.
Все-таки о чем говорили вот сегодня в первый день Валдая? Вот что бы вы особенно выделили?
Ну, я бы сегодня, пожалуй, выделил встречу участников дискуссионного клуба с первым заместителем руководителя администрации президента Вячеславом Володиным. Выступление Вячеслав Володин очень эмоционально. Он сказал, что сегодня вопрос стоит так. Есть Путин, есть Россия. Нет Путина, нет России.
Hitler aber ist Deutschland, wie Deutschland Hitler ist. Hitler siegt!
A poll from the Associated Press and the University of Chicago found that about 80% of Russians still support Putin. According to the poll, 3 out of 4 Russians say they trust the presidency, and 2 out of 3 expressed faith in the military. Nearly 70% of the poll's respondents said some parts of the Ukraine rightfully belong to Russia. The poll was based on interviews with 2,000 Russians.
Nora's description of life in Germany, published in 1939, is full of everyday accounts of love for the Führer. She found people endlessly keen to explain how grateful they felt.
It's like Germany is a ship that was broken on the rocks. And by gift of God in Hitler, we have a leader who can repair and steer that ship.
Путин избран народом. А власть, вы знаете, это только кажется, что она в результате каких-то там операций предоставляется, в результате их каибов, все остальное. Богом власть дается. Он лидер нации, страны. И если он этим лидером не будет, мы будем в болоте. Мы благодаря ему, этому человеку, 10 лет назад, когда мы тонули
раздался этот голос из этого болота и сказали: мы есть на весь мир. Когда все считали, что нас уже нет. И он пришел и сказал: мы есть. Мы будем вас мочить в сортирах. Он своих дочерей спрятал. Это что, действие чиновника?
Я считаю, честно говоря, и Путина человеком, который был послан судьбой и Господом России в трудный для России час, для нашей большой общей нации.
Мне хочется как благословение вас взять.
Спасибо, с удовольствием.
Do you worship him?
Worship is too much.
Well, some people do. I heard the other day at Berchtesgaden, outside Hitler's house, these old women actually ate the gravel where he'd stood.
It's like they're under a spell.
Yes, but you don't know what it was like before Hitler. We have every reason to be thankful.
Before Hitler, Germany had been deep in economic depression. Before Hitler, unemployment had stood at 7 million. Before Hitler, Germany was a democracy, but too many parties had split the vote, so governments were weak and unable to solve the crisis. Hitler offered dictatorship, all power in the hands of one man. And Germany was quick to accept Hitler's terms.
16 лет назад ВВП принял на руки страну, которая едва дышала. Крах и упадок присутствовали буквально везде и во всем. Государство, по сути, находилось под полным контролем отвратительных олигархических кланов. Казна была пуста и вся в долгах. Экономика в убитом состоянии, а природные ресурсы, наши национальные богатства во владении невесть откуда взявшихся проходимцев. Перспективы России на тот драматический момент туманны более чем. Некоторые знающие люди оценивают наше состояние 16-летней давности как весьма близкое к катастрофическому. А если более конкретно, под вопросом было само выживание страны, сохранение ее целостности. Так что же изменилось за прошедшие 16 лет? В масштаб изменений тяжело поверить, но он действительно поражает в исторической перспективе. Сегодня Россия ведущая мировая держава, с мнением которой вынуждена считаться буквально вся остальная планета. В общемировом рейтинге Путин политик и лидер номер один. Это неоспоримый факт. Москва больше не мальчик для битья. Сегодня в кремлевских кабинетах активно и довольно успешно проводят политику по возвращению утерянных в 1991 году земель под свое влияние.
But then, at the end of the day, they said, now see what we have achieved. And it was pretty impressive.
Hitler had promised a Germany reborn. He said he was building for a state to last for 1,000 years. He'd rebuild Berlin on a magnificent scale. There'd be an assembly hall in every city, a swimming bath in every village, a house and garden and car for every worker. Much of this was pure fantasy, but enough was achieved to pump German pride.
Confidence. That's what it was. Everywhere.
But the economic prosperity and relative stability that Putin has brought, or that Russia has achieved in the last 9 years, are very important to people.
Масса людей получили рабочие места, у большого количества людей появилась уверенность в завтрашнем дне, простите за, так сказать, патетический такое выражение, но это было.
And a great sense of Germanness. National costumes, parades, music. And even if you found it all a bit funny, there was so much good.
Чего это мероприятие было?
Ну, данное мероприятие, оно, скажем так, во многом против вмешательства США в наши дела, вот, чтобы в России не сделали Майдан.
On the streets of Moscow, paranoia and patriotism have morphed into a nationalist hysteria.
Действительно, Путин попал, так сказать, извините за эту рискованную метафору, он нащупал эту эрогенную зону, так сказать, у населения. Просто он, который 2 года назад был хромой уткой, тут, значит, возвращение величия России, Крым наш.
Но Крым – это священное. Это что изменило? Все поняли, что Россия – великая держава. Это самое главное. Все.
И мы видим действительно всплеск искренней, так сказать, симпатии к Путину, который вот это вот коллективное, бессознательное, как говорится, он, так сказать, воплотил.
President Putin has divided society and distorted reality. He may have won over Russian hearts and minds for now, but he's unleashed an atmosphere that breeds fear, paranoia, and hatred, turning Russians against imagined enemies, both at home and abroad.
Such pictures were seen around the world. Hardly surprising Nora was suspicious.
It's all you foreigners. Curious to see if we Germans are as bad as they say, huh?
The truth, Nora had to find out for herself.
Early in my stay, I was reading the German papers. Problems all over the world. Unrest in France, misery in Russia, a shipping strike back home in California. In Germany, everything's rosy.
You know, this is a country in which every single television channel and every single newspaper and almost every single internet website, with a few tiny exceptions, are controlled by the state and in such a way that they appear to be all slightly different. This is not one Pravda saying one thing every day. This is a wide spectrum of different media, and they all say the same thing in a tabloid way, in a sophisticated way, in an entertainment way, or in a news way. They're telling people the same stories that Putin wants them to hear. And the story they've been telling for the last several months, many months actually now, is bitterly anti-American, bitterly anti-European, and now very close to becoming warmongering in a way that I never even remember even from a year ago. The hatred towards Ukraine, the hatred towards Americans, the use of semi-fascist symbolism and people marching and angered faces, this is something really, really new and different.
I was so shocked. I wanted to speak to someone, so I launched into this spiel at Professor Moritz, the musician who kept the lodgings upstairs. And his reaction, I will never forget. This extraordinary phrase he came out with. Still, sprich durch die Blume.
Shh, speak through a flower.
I didn't know what he meant. And then it dawned on me. Speak through a flower. Say only good things. Don't criticize.
With this latest narrowing of the media landscape, opposing points of view have been all but silenced. In late February, opposition leader Boris Nemtsov was killed in the shadows of the Kremlin. With his murder still unsolved, there's growing fear that Russia's increasing intolerance of dissenting views could turn lethal. We wanted to meet with the journalists of Novaya Gazeta, who know better than anyone the dangers of telling the truth in Putin's Russia. It's one of the country's last independent investigative newspapers, and 6 of its reporters have been murdered since 2001.
Those that didn't fit in Hitler's Germany had reason to fear. The Nazis allowed no opposition. Political parties that once had stood against them were banned. Their leaders left the country or stayed to face harassment or arrest.
So much for my cheerful, festive Germany. It made me so angry. I remember standing there on the stairwell, my hand clutching the banister, and I just wanted to scream at her. Stop it! Stop it! Stop the broadcasts, halt the parades, tear down the banners all red like blood, stop the chanting, and please, please treat this insane man who thinks he's Führer in some asylum somewhere. But she just fixed me with this infinitely reasonable smile and said,
"You mustn't judge ours a bad government. We need to be ruled hard until things are sorted out. We'd have gone communist if the Nazis hadn't saved us. And the Führer is good and fine to all who willingly obey. And he knows that we must be united in order to regain our place among the strong nations of the world.
Нам как никогда надо сейчас сплотиться и поддерживать Владимира Владимировича.
И в эти дни, когда происходит мобилизация всех врагов России, я призываю вас сплотиться вокруг президента России.
Потому что мы верим в его силу, в него верим.
Это ужасно, когда оскорбляют Путина. Это самый величайший человек из всех сейчас президентов. А кого вы считаете президентом? Господи, даже с ума сойти.
Магазин продуктовый, зайдите в магазин.
А что он вам дал? Ой, что хорошего? Вот расскажите. Все хорошее. А что он сделал плохого? Все хорошее.
Путин президент мира! Ура! Правильно!
To regain our place among the strong nations of the world. Hitler's seductive promise. The Versailles Treaty had left Germany weak. If Germany rearmed, the Allies could invade. Hitler had called their bluff. He'd pulled out of disarmament talks. He'd brought back army training for all German men. And in '36, he'd marched into the Rhineland, a buffer with France where no German troops had been allowed since 1990.
The renewed focus on Russia's military started with its annexation of Crimea in southern Ukraine, but you should really look back 6 years ago to 2008 when Russia invaded another former Soviet state, Georgia. There's a view in Russia that that's when the world started taking Russia seriously again, because for years Russia had seen itself as being far behind, hopelessly behind the West in military terms, and that's a problem that Russia's leadership wanted to correct. In recent years, Russia has started what many military analysts call a massive rearmament. $730 billion over 10 years. In military terms, we're talking about 100 new warships, 600 new warplanes, 1,000 new helicopters to go along with what remains the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, larger even than the U.S. Now, the focus is not on another Cold War necessarily, really on what Russia calls the near abroad. Those are the former Soviet republics, like Ukraine, like Georgia, that Russia wants to expand, reassert its influence once again, and it feels it needs, in order to do that, to expand its military again.
Hitler talked of peace often. It wasn't a contradiction. He said he was arming Germany not for war, but defense. Like the hedgehog, Germany would be secure but threaten no one. Many European leaders found this reasonable. But Hitler did have the support of the great majority. Maybe not for war, not at first, but Hitler convinced the German people war would make Germany strong. And after so many humiliations, he'd fed a deep desire for revenge.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is trying to revive the Russian Empire. That's according to Latvia's Foreign Minister Edgars Rinkēvičs, who told German news service Deutsche Welle that NATO needs to be aware of the Kremlin's challenge. The Latvian politician added that the military alliance and the European Union should take very seriously the danger posed by Putin's concept of the Russian world. Putin has previously claimed that Russian military actions in Ukraine were taken to defend the rights of Russian speakers, a move that has been compared to German Führer Hitler's rhetoric and subsequent invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1938.
By 1938, the year Nora Wall left for England, Germany was on a war footing.
The day that I left, it was the Führer's birthday, April 20th, 1938. Parades in every town, just like the day I arrived, flags, cheering crowds, but this time too, tanks and armored trucks. I was a bit the worse for wear. The night before, they had sent me off Eric and Ursula, toasting me, toasting Germany, toasting Hitler. I stayed very quiet. I don't think they noticed.
It's as if the whole working strength of every man, woman and child is power concentrated in the Führer's fist. And with that, he carves our future. How a people forces its way upwards is unimportant, but the goal is magnificent.
And you know, I don't think it was the drink that made their faces glow with such radiance.